Hello, everyone. I'm Junko Yokota, Director of the Center for Teaching Through Children's Books, and we're delighted to have a series of international guests coming to us from various countries. And our very first guest of our inaugural show is Roger Mello from Brazil. He's a longtime friend of our center, frequent participant in many of our events and things, and we're delighted that he's our first guest that we're going to have. So, with that as an introduction, Roger, if you would start by saying a little bit about your work, your studio, and how it is that a Hans Christian Andersen award-winning, a world-renowned illustrator has a studio. No, we have many studios, and in fact, your most frequent studio, which is, of course, the airplane. So, do tell us all about it.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here with you. Today I'm in Rio de Janeiro, so in a place called Leblon. So I want to show you from here because there is a mountain and many trees here, but the light would not work, I think. But it was so interesting because I am a huge USBBY fan, and Christina and Junko are my great friends. Junko is like from the family. Christina too, but all of my friends around the states and from all over. I'm so happy to be here with you. We are talking about the studio. It's so nice that it started by me because as Marina Abramovich says, once I heard she's a performer, everybody knows Marina Abramovich, and she said, the studio is the worst place for me. I am never in a studio. The studio is the place where I find no art in studio. I don't agree with her, but I understand she's a performer. And she's a person that has been changing her back yard, let's say. She's changing her scenery all the time because she's an artist of the world. I discovered soon that I am a nomadic person, not the way that Marina Abramovich is, because she is a performer. I am also from the theater, but my relation with the book, as a book lover, I was always a book lover. I was always surrounded by books, by comics, and I knew that books would make me travel. Okay, everybody knows this is a very old and, let's say, used metaphor, but the book is also an object that was created because the possibility of destruction. So when we remember of an iconic library like the Alexandria Library, we think of a library that has been burned, that has been looted so many times, that the book as a codex would be created so that if the library was burning, were destroyed, you could pick as many books, as many codexes as you could. So the shape of the book, the design of the book is a design of a nomad movement. So soon I discovered that the thing that I liked most, that were books, were related to another thing that I like so much, that is to travel. Not to travel only as a metaphor, but to do real travels. Of course, sometimes the metaphoric travel is even deeper. So I'm happy here to talk about something that I love to do. I love to create studios. Junko knows that me and Vone bought another studio in Brasilia, where we are spending more time after the pandemic scene. And I am always restoring a place to be a studio. As soon as it's done, I'm out. I move to another place. Isn't it, Junko?
Yes, I think you learned that from Mr. Kang, the idea of the moving studio, and see if you can find where my next studio is going to be. But that's
Yes.
very much the concept of what
Mr. Kant
you're
says has a say that is everyday change, and he speaks no English, but
right,
he knows everyday change.
right.
Everyday change is his phrase, is his
So
yeah.
we're interested in hearing about not only the many physical places that you can call studio, both formally, like your place in Brasilia, informally but frequent, like your place there in Leblon, or perhaps the most nomadic one I mentioned on the airplane. I will later show some images of our most grand studio, perhaps the Rose Studio, but we also want to hear how your sense of traveling and nomadic studio impacts the work that you do.
Uh-huh. That's very interesting. We have a point here because sometimes I was trying to 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 have things as things should be, but sometimes they are not. Sometimes you have to create your own or to be okay with your own way of doing things. It took me some time to understand what is a nomadic thought. I
Mhm.
have a good friend, a philosopher, Regina Schopke, and she has about a book about the nomadic thought. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter which, let's say, which school you follow in philosophy, and we can talk in our case about the philosophy of illustrations,
Mhm.
of narrative images, uh, as a moving thing. It doesn't matter which school you pick. You can be, I don't know, you can be Socratic, you can follow Plato, you can follow I don't know, Schopenhauer, but it doesn't matter. The thing is that your heart, your head, your thought is moving. Your thought can understand what somebody said, and you can say, okay, I took that as a point, but my thought keeps moving. So we keep moving again, literally and metaphorically.
Mhm.
And I could soon understand that the readers were in that nomadic movement. I could see, and that was a great pleasure, that teachers, librarians, specialists, they were in the same, let's say, silk traveling road
All
which has always been an artistic work. So from time to time, you see, Brazil is a huge country,
right.
and although some people complain about teachers that they are a little bit stuck to some thoughts, I have seen the reality as an opposite of this thought. I have seen teachers giving classes under a tree by the river, by the bank of the river,
Right.
because they were acting as authors of their own books. So they know that not only children are a public, but they are also authors.
So it's interesting because most of us in this session right now are librarians and teachers, educators, and your concept that if teachers can teach by the river and under a tree, that they're telling the story of their teaching through a moving location, we can then understand how this relates to how your studio that moves from place to place differs. We'd be interested in seeing some images of either your moving studio or the works that you have created in various places. I know, for example, that sometimes when you have to go to the airport to pick up someone in the evening, you'll go in the morning because you like the liveliness of the airport and you set up space right there at the airport to create into a studio. So, what works have you created? Where were you when you created them? And how did the shifting studio location impact what you finally created?
You know, Junko, that every for the artist, I would say that the the fiction is done on both reality
Mhm.
or the simulacrum of reality, which sometimes is more fiction, and of the fantastic part. So one natural, one overnatural, let's say. So some of my teachers or some of the artists that I admire, they would say to me, pay attention in the way, even in your way from home to the school or from home to the airport, because you are going to see strange things. And if you, yeah, of course, and if you don't see the strange things, um, the strange one might be you.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, there is something that is in between this way as well, I would say. Um, I don't make a difference between images and words. You know this.
Mm-hmm.
I always mistake them. And I think it's a good mistake that we can do, because both were born from the trace.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, there was the trace, even
Okay.
before the thought, I would say. So there is a very beautiful I think you can see it through the internet or somewhere. The last movie from Sebastião Salgado. In the beginning, it's written "fotografar." To photograph means photo is light.
Mm-hmm.
Graph is to in Portuguese would say grafar. The verb to graph, it can be to write or to draw.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a word that is good for both things. So to graph is to write, is to draw, is also to read, both of the things. So
Mm-hmm.
there is no such a difference. When the first person draw a rhinoceros in the stone, the person was using the trace, not only the mass of ink, but the trace. And there is no trace in nature. Trace is artificiality. And if you were drawing a letter or a signal, it's all made of trace. So we find the common place in which the trace for drawing or the trace for writing has the same place, but still a nomadic movement. So some artists are going to deal more with fiction. Some artists are going to deal more with, let's say, the real. But even the real, let's say, is a fictionalized point of view of the reality.
Mm-hmm.
So you are still creating, you are still cutting things, cutting a reality.
So you have
So
wonderful ideas for how this all comes together, but I'm telling you, we all want to see some work. We want to see your
yes,
images. So what I have that I'm sharing with you right now is the a slideshow that I created a couple of years back, or a few years back, about the making of a very specific book. But the concept that we want to convey through this is the idea that not only do we have two different creators, but we had multiple locations in which this book was created. So it started with the idea when after Roger won the Hans Christian Andersen Award and there was an original exhibition for his work, he had an appendix erupt in Korea. So then at that point, he had to stay in Korea for 2 weeks after his surgery, and staying there meant that he had another opportunity to be inspired by what he was surrounded by. So he created this work of art that you see here. And with this began the idea of there being a boy made of magma in the center of the earth, and that later became Jeju Island. So, with this kernel of an idea, a team was put together and they built this entire studio. See this gorgeous building back there? This studio, Rose Studio, known for Roger, Junko, and Wuhan, came together to be a beautiful space for them to work. So, in this studio, were many supplies. Yes, that's Roger sniffing paint. A place in which a draft could be written of the first draft of the story, oral storytelling, which was done by Mr. Kang. You need to back up and know that they don't speak directly to each other through language. They speak through gestures and sort of understanding through creation, because Roger speaks Portuguese, obviously, and English, and many other languages, some like Spanish and Italian and all. But Mr. Kang speaks Korean and Japanese. So things went through me, who could speak the language of both of them. But in the studio, we had created the first beginnings of it. When the work was not completed at the end of a few weeks in Korea, we moved to Chicago. Now, some of you will recognize the room in which the CTCB friends met for many years for our meetings. But we ultimately decided to move it to Evanston and create a studio in Evanston. So Rose Studio Chicago version was created here in Evanston, and complete with kimchi, of course. And Sana, who is with us on the chat today, who is helping to be an interpreter through it all, and coffee, of course. They went through the process of creating work. And what you see here is much being discussed, much being created, many different media, inspiration, thought, discussion, printouts, translations. And so here we had the idea that, well, quilting rulers had to be used when you don't have art rulers even. But late into the night, we kept working. And at the end, we had a floor full of in progress, a hallway full of probably final works, and a finished studio. We returned back to Jeju again for more inspiration, more work at the Rose Studio, lots of coffee because, Roger can't work without coffee. They even made mugs for him of his own work that you see in the lower right. But you see lots of helpers, late night hours. And so I would like to hear from you, Roger. I've just told the story of how food is important, how the ambiance is important, having helpers is important, but how does your idea of studio and location and access to on-site places impact the kind of work that you are able to create?
It's wonderful because we at the making of Magma Boy can give us an idea of how, in that case, the nomadic studio would be, let's say, the paradigm of what is this nomadic studio. So in order to have a book done, we go to the place, we met the Hanyos, that are those amazing women that they fish. They start to fish young, and then now they are on their 80s or more.
And still driving.
And all this, the idea was brought in a crazy camp that was, of course, a crazy idea of Mr. Kang. When he wanted to take some entrepreneurs, the government of Korea wanted him to let's say, to make them a little bit crazier, because they did their job on education perfect, but for them there was missing the sparkle of creativity that Korea has it so much. But in that case, he wanted the government of Korea wanted a, a certain regard, a certain kind of craziness that only us could give.
In a sense, it's taking children out of their classroom space and putting them in an outdoor space that was away from formal schooling to be able to spark creativity. So your idea of talking about the nomadic space of having creativity inspired by their surroundings took place at Crazy Camp.
It took place, and in Crazy Camp, it was funny because after the meeting, I remember that I was in Japan, and Fred Min, that is one of the owners of the Nami Island place, and he's like the family of Mr. Kang, he and Min family. And he took me in the airport, and he said, I wonder what you're going to do with these people tonight. And I said to Fred, because we are long-term friends, I said to him, people are gonna cry, Fred, after this this workshop. And it was so funny because everybody was crying. They were so moved because I did another crazy dynamic that I was developing through my career as an illustrator and writer all over Brazil, that I took one person back, giving the back to the other, and one person was describing someone they knew or they knew not from the reality. It could be from the reality. And the other person was illustrating that person. She was doing the spoken portrait. I don't know how you say this in for police investigation. And they were doing it's big, and the other person does. And then when you saw the person that you described from another person's handcraft, you wrote this person a letter. And it was very, very strong to see young people, some people there was the president of no, the president of Korea filmmaking festival, and he was 80 something, and it was so moving to see him and a very, very, very young entrepreneur from Korea. At the same time, everybody was so moved. And after this, we went to a picnic, like the old tradition from Korea, where they ate from a bowl, a metal bowl, and then we soon started to see a volcanic activity because Mr. Kang and his team, they were melting the stones of Jeju, which is a volcanic island. And out of a sudden, we saw this explosion of light coming from the ground. And I said to Mr. Kang, you are Magma Boy. And then the book came.
So, really, that situation of being at Crazy Camp, being surrounded with people who were trying to be creative, but being on a volcanic island was, in fact, the notion that the place where you were and the people who you were with then created the kernel for the idea that magma
Yes,
was born.
you see that movement, Junko. It's very interesting because it has everything to do what we said before. So we were in an island. It's a volcanic island, but from this comes Magma Boy, that is a totally fiction being. And some of the great thing that inspires me, for example, in doing books, no matter if it's writing or illustrating, is the character. I am in love with characters, and we soon realized that Magma Boy is a very, very solitary boy. And when he wakes up, he's angry. Oh my God, he's so angry. And the Raniel that we created, and you were together in this creation, she was the oldest possible. She was 100 years. So we have to deal with this again, a nomadic creation, not a nomadic in terms of movement of space, but maybe a nomadic in terms of movement of time.
So, I could talk to you forever about Magma Boy because that's one of the books I was so keenly involved with from its inception all the way through its completion. And it's a book that many of you have also seen, but it's not published here in the US. And so I think it's a little bit harder for everyone to have a grasp on what this book is. But we'd be keenly interested in finding out how your role of Nomadic Studio played in the parts of books that are published here in the US that the people who are in audience and on our Zoom chat today might be able to have their access to. For example, where were you when you created Charcoal Boy? How did that studio space impact your ideas for how you developed and did the work for Charcoal Boy?
Choco Boy, I was in love with this kind of ink. That you know that I'm always in love with the neon colors.
You would have
And
never guessed that was your
I
color.
again, I was in a movement when I was a child, we came from Brasilia in the center, highlands in the center of Brazil, going to the beach, which is really, really far
Mm-hmm.
away. So it takes us 2 days to go by car. And on our way, when I was a child, it was, of course, already totally forbidden to have children working, children's labor in charcoal chain.
Mm-hmm.
In charcoal chain, burning charcoal means burning charcoal to do pig iron. Pig iron is still now the fourth commodity of Brazil. So by that time, I came from Brasilia, which is, Brasilia is a modern city. It was the first, let's say, modern world thumbed by UNESCO. It's a patrimony. It's of UNESCO, and we were going out of this place with these modern structures and seeing a structure that were those ovens made of how they say clay.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw them as something beautiful and intriguing because there was a smoke uh,
Mm-hmm.
getting out from these, let's say, houses.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as if I was coming from my house to the airport, I was going from my house to the beach, to the sea, and I could see this, let's say, this undefinable, without definition landscape,
Mm-hmm.
which involved the bringing down of the forest of the Brazilian savanna
Mm-hmm.
and the construction of these ovens that would burn the trunks, the how they say, the wood.
Mm-hmm.
So this scenery, let's say, many times the background is the character again as a corruptive system. It's not the way we classify it. So I could see the background as a character,
Mm-hmm.
and there were people working there. This kind of work or job, labor, usually includes um, still now slavery, slave condition
Right.
and children's labor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, this was a horrible scene that there was inside of this horrible scene as a contradiction, poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and that image kept on my mind. And when I was a grown up, I
Mm-hmm.
decided that I had to. It's not that I wanted to. I had to give my share on this scenery as a
Mm.
shout. But
So,
my shout cannot be another shout, but the shout of literature, of fiction. It's my
mm-hmm.
way to protest. So the difficult thing is not to make something as a pamphlet. I don't. You say pamphlet,
What?
pamphlet,
Pamphlet?
propaganda. Propaganda. I didn't want to turn the life of this boy, the
Uh-huh.
story of this boy, as pamphlet.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to turn him into statistics. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted him as a person, as more than a person, a character.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know from Shakespeare that a character is even more human than humans. So that we can take, yes, because characters, we can do whatever we want with them. We can make them suffer. Of course, we are going to suffer with them,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't feel pity for them. We can be with them, and we should never be out of the company of characters, but they are there to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
So comes this boy, and my way not to turn into him, not to turn him as an anthropological thing,
Mm-hmm.
not to objectify him, to humanize him, was to have a narrator that was not human. He was a hornet, and this hornet also does his nest upside down, made of clay. So he didn't understand why this boy doesn't fly. And so I'm talking about the story, but I'm talking about images too. All the time, I'm talking about the substance of clay. I'm talking about fire. I'm talking about smoke. And
So
I did fire in this book with this kind of ink,
I
the
remember.
neon. So we have the magenta, we have the yellow, and I don't have a yellow here, but
Playing the
mixing
dark
yellow and we have magenta and we have orange.
the
Mixing
dark
magenta and orange, we have red as well. And we have black. So we are talking about another thing. We are talking about, remember, we talked about graph, to graph, the verb to graph, which is to write or to draw. So we have the graphic, which is the design of the book is very important because when we are talking about graphic design, we are talking about limits. If you want all the colors in the world, you're going to use 4 colors. You're going to use cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. But if you use special colors, like we did, neon magenta, neon orange, and black, we can do the grays, we can do the mixing, and we can do the red. So we are talking about 3 colors as 3 limitation grounds, layers, that we use as a plus. This always as a contradiction in art. Limits don't limit you, they expand you.
So I have to ask you, you talk about limiting colors, and I know that that's an artistic decision that you make and an artistic statement in what you produce. Does that mean that it's easier to travel with all your supplies because you're limiting your palette?
I like to travel with all my supplies, but sometimes I can travel with only. This is a big moleskine, isn't it?
Yes. Moleskine being most.
So you can travel with your moleskin with some brushes. Of course, you need a pen. You need, you know that I'm always carrying things or buying things in the store, and you can do the simulacrum. You can do the simulation. And it's funny because it's been a long turn since I haven't been traveling by plane.
Right.
And since I haven't been traveling by plane, I stop sometimes a critical and so important moment, which is to finish or to start things. So I had a book,
I see.
it's a novel, and it's almost over. And why can't I finish it? Because I'm not traveling by plane. I need
Ah,
to
and the
travel by
plane is
plane,
office.
plane by playing with the computer and the pencil and this place of total peaceness, the peaceful place that is a plane with this sound. There's a sound. It makes me finish things or start things.
It's true. I
So
do a
I
lot of writing on an airplane. Uh-huh.
don't you. You
I-
are a nomadic person too, Junko.
But an airplane is a very good place to work. Yes, I
You know,
agree.
but nomadic people, there are
A
some things
little
in
bit.
common.
I'm going
Uh,
to use our concentration.
coffee,
Yes.
pen, pencil,
Mhm.
paper, computer,
Yes.
tea. You have tea there. Coffee and tea is for travelers.
Mhm.
And because of the Silk Road, and sometimes, Junko, for example, I am in one of the studios. This is a small studio. Um, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to my mother
I know
because
I've
I
stayed
was
there.
fixing another studio
Uh-huh.
here, very close to here, closer to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to fix this place because another renter is entering that place. And I stood in this temporary place doing lots of illustrations. There are 2 big tables, and I could find in the middle of this Moleskine, this huge Moleskine, I could find some of the drawings that I did in a different way. You can see some Brazilian animals.
I would not have picked this out as being yours.
It is mine.
Uh,
Unbelievable. I was working on nonfiction and I did many
ah,
pictures of,
I see.
you see some birds.
Yes.
Um,
Wow.
I,
Okay,
this
can you hold
was,
that up a little bit longer so that we can see it? Because that's very different from the work of yours that we know.
isn't it?
Okay. Yes. Wow. And what year did you produce these?
What year?
Hmm.
It's been, let's say, 15 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Because I like to do this kind of illustration too.
Mhm.
And I wanted children to have contact with the animals from Brazil. So
I
you
see.
see some of
Wow,
them.
look at that. So those were produced in your the Leblon near the beach place, the one that you rent out as so
So
that's another
they
studio.
they were done in another studio. There are countless studios. They were
So
done in Barra da Tijuca, which is another place. Okay, this one looks more like me.
yes.
So this is a very old book too.
Very nice. Yes, we would
Nobody,
instantly recognize
nobody.
this.
It's the first time somebody see this art.
Oh,
So
we are the
I,
ones.
I separated it specifically for you. So another one. Those are very old illustrations.
Wow. Look at that.
So I
Is
think
this
there is
part of
an
the book
effect here.
or is it are you
Oh,
illustrating a
see,
story or
you have the constellations
Mhm.
in the
I
landscape.
see, I see. Uh-huh.
Yes,
Yes.
and then you have the same landscape with the creatures.
Ah, right. Coming in now.
It's
Mm-hmm.
a very old book, and I keep all of them, Junko. I am nomadic in everything else, but I keep all the illustrations with myself. So I have many Moleskinis like this, and many files,
Mm-hmm.
many files. I have also some. This is crazy. So this is a comic that I did for the a very famous soap opera in Brazil.
Oh, I know that Elisa is drooling over this piece of art right now.
So this was all for this funny soap opera. It was so popular in Brazil. I never was so popular in my life when I did
It
this.
was
So
used.
there are many. See this. This is a very old one in a very.
Ah, look at this. Right, beautiful. Mm-hmm.
So you have different styles here.
Mm-hmm.
Different styles. By that time, I was not using because sometimes I always do the PVA,
What is
so
PVA? Oh, the house paint?
house paint, polyvinyl amidic. This is my beloved ink, but by that time I was using liquid aquarelle, so we call it Ecolini or
Mhm.
something like this. So completely different style. Many things here.
We should have an exhibition of Roger Mello over time to show the progression of all the different things that you have done.
Yes, funny. But usually, this is the ink that I use. And I take these old bottles and some I buy them in the cans and
Mm.
I keep doing it. Junko, let's see if I can open my my show here. Can you?
Yes.
Okay.
Changing.
So in this Skinjin, I did this. Skinjin is that rhinoceros. Fonei is the president of Kinjin. Fonei, my husband, and this is also I am the vice president. So funny.
Oh,
And
nepotism
this is
here.
This is the apartment. I'm using this thing as a cursor. This is the apartment I restored, and I came to restore now. So in this apartment, you can see a book that I did that I decided to illustrate with photographs. So
Mhm.
I was doing the studio. This is a studio. You can see so many books over there. Can you see?
Right, right. We can see
In
it
the
in your
ball, in the
bow or
circle.
reflection. Uh-huh.
You can see me taking the picture.
Yeah.
I learned how to do the rhino origami,
Mhm.
which
We're
was
very impressed. Uh-huh.
it was so difficult. I can't do it anymore. And you see the books, and I was finishing the restoration because I was doing this crazy studio closer to the beach, and it's from the 30s, so it's a restoration respecting the old house, the old building, and you can see the reflection. The reflection is me, so that is the idea that the author can be the character. You see?
I see. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I love this point of view. This um, what's the name of the philosopher? I'll soon remember his name. Okay, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
So I was showing the cormorants in China that were used as pets to paint,
Mm-hmm.
and the Audubon version of them. And I've been to Tokyo.
Wow.
Tokyo, I saw that book, which was so crazy to know how this idea of fiction and
Mhm.
reality is mixed in the world of Audubon. So I was showing this because he was trying to do the flamingo the right size. So he was making it to enter the page. This is my family
Oh,
in
your
Brasilia.
family.
I am the smallest one here, my father, and we are in Brasilia, which is also a place, let's say, known by the idea of the trace. You have the trace by Lucio Costa here, and you have the thing, the itself, the building, the idea, everything that is fiction now in our head is going to turn into reality. Or, like Bartolomeu Campos Queiroz, Brazilian writer, says, everything that is now real once was a dream in the mind of somebody. So we don't give that attention to important thing as fantasy. We
Mhm.
should. Again, traveling to do the exhibition in Shihiro Art Museum, Azumino, not in Tokyo. I was invited to do also an installation. And again, traveling, I was traveling. I had a pen. I
Mhm.
don't need so much to do it. I had, how they call it, this piece of paper to
Napkin?
the
Napkin.
napkin. I had also a stick, and the garden started to
Ah.
start, and then you have the thing. So it was once fiction, now it's trace, but now it's real. So you have Vonay and our helper there, Mr. Kang. He, I love to show this picture because he was drawing with the food.
Yes, he
So
plays with
he's
his food all
always
the time. He
he
plays with
plays.
food and makes art.
So everything is trace again.
This
Junko,
is my birthday card.
remember this. Remember
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Where
And
is this?
Tbilisi.
Tbilisi.
Mhm.
And this is also something very important because, again, as travelers, we
Mhm.
have this card place, surface where we are going to do things. We were there as jury members. Junko invited me, as always.
Mhm.
And also, as jury members, we turn into the first, let's say, readers of this other book that is an exhibition. So Tbilisi, Portugal, Évora, an exhibition, something that I like so much to show. Again, as
Mhm.
the traveler, the nomadic studio, we have the amazing friend and artist
Mhm.
André da Loba, and he is a very nice person, and he's giving to the children his process as a storyteller. He created this person that you can move the pages, and the person, the crazy character, changes the colors of his and the arms and the legs, but he is the head of
Mhm.
the book. So I love this idea of the book as a body. So
Mhm.
the book is not only a traveling tool, it's not only the real time machine, but it's also part of our body.
Mhm. Right. Mhm.
That was the first exhibition in Munich, in Munich Youth Library, International Youth Library, which is one of the our amazing spots in the world, isn't it, Junko?
It is.
Everything began there. With
Oh.
me, everything began there.
Lemon Butterfly was created in a hotel room in New Zealand during the IBI Congress and finished in a hotel room in Beijing.
Yes,
And
it's
I
true.
know that as soon as you get into a hotel room, the first thing you do is you start moving the furniture so that you can get the best light on the desk. And so
I'm,
that
I'm
is
trying.
a studio within a hotel room.
Yes, I was trying to find my pictures from Lemon Butterfly. Lemon Butterfly was a book that it was so nice because another important thing on this nomadic studio. So you need to do dummies.
Mhm.
Dummies are part of my life, and you know this.
Yes.
Sometimes I do
Always carry
two,
it with
three
you.
dummies of the same book, and the dummy is going to be really, really close to the book, to the
Mhm.
final book itself. So they gave me in China, CCPBG friends gave me a dummy. It was a white book, and but the pages inside were like codex. And I said, no, I'm in China, and I have to talk about my relation with leporellos, my relation with wall dividers. How they call them?
Like the panels?
The panels,
Mhm. Yes.
Chinese panels, because they were always like me. For me, they were like books. They
Mhm.
were books inserted in our life. They were
Nice.
like pages. They were like the Mayan codex, you
In the
know,
US, we call the Leporello's accordion books, I think is a term.
accordion books. Accordion. I love this. I love this name. Accordion books. So it's really like accordion books. And I decided that it would be a white book from the very beginning,
Mhm.
because when they gave me this white dummy, you don't know why. I didn't think about it, but it was at that moment I take this white dummy as a white proposition. And
For
Mr.
those of you who
Chow
don't
Ven
know the dummy,
Chuan.
they gave him a blank book. It was completely bound. It had a hardcover outside and all the pages inside, and everything was white. Outside, inside, everything was white.
And it was my second book with Chow Ven Chuan, the Hans Christian Andersen winner,
Mhm.
as a writer. And this book, completely different from the other that was called The Feather, and there were many colored birds, and it was a book of the abundance. In this book, that was so related to transformation and transformation through death, I knew immediately that the colors, colors are like characters too. They are very important for me. And white color doesn't mean the same everywhere.
Mhm.
And so colors should not mean anything. They should not be associated to anything, because
They-
when you have one color and you have the other, it's another effect. There is no color without the background.
Mhm.
So I took this white one, and I decided that the story is about a lemon butterfly, and Mr. Chao Chuan is the head of philosophy and literature in Beijing University.
Mhm.
So, but he says the place where he does really philosophy is illustrated books, picture books.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I was trying not to illustrate the butterfly. I was not trying to illustrate the feather. I was trying to illustrate Mr. Calvin Swan.
So you used only basically scissors, right?
So scissors, and
Or
so I decided that I would cut the butterfly in the middle of the pages where they meet, and I would use also yellow, neon green, and black. But the book is about a butterfly that wants so hard to find a field of flowers.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about this person, this character that is looking for something so desperately that the lack of this something is the person, is the character. So you are not a character anymore. You are the lack of the field. And when you turn the leporello, the character is not in the middle, but it's in the edge of the page. So I didn't plan this, but we have to have a dummy to do this, to
Right.
discover things,
Mhm.
to discover things that you knew, but that you didn't know that you knew. You understand?
Here it is. You've taken the philosophy that was presented by the author, your interpretation, which is this search, and the object of the white book, a pair of scissors or a knife, perhaps,
Yeah.
and created an entire book in two different hotel rooms in two different countries. So, in fact, the world is your studio.